Hi there, good afternoon. How are you all this fine Saturday afternoon, all you I-doers? Let's talk about the beautiful ritual of hand fasting. As I give you my hand, so I give you my heart. As I lay my hand in yours, so I lay my dreams in your keeping. And as my hand is bound with yours, so is my life, today, tomorrow, and all our days to come. How beautiful is that? Handfastings are one of the most popular rituals performed at wedding ceremonies here in Scotland. They're performed in other ceremonies, but primarily weddings. And that's because they are an incredibly beautiful way of bringing the sacred into a ceremony. And if you've watched any of my stuff or know anything about me, you'll know that that is really important to me. I think it's really important, certainly in my ceremonies, to bring the sacred in. And that's because although most of the couples who come to me say they want things like a very relaxed, laid back, fun ceremony, full of Scottishness ceremony, they also want it to have depth and meaning within it. So even if they say they want a non-religious ceremony, what that usually means is that they don't want it to be boring or pious or to be about a God that they don't even worship. But they still want it to have the depth that we find in these religious ceremonies or in some religious ceremonies. In other words, they want their ceremony to be a sacred one. And so it should be, because marriage is sacred and commitment is sacred. And during a ceremony, any ceremony, there's always a point that I call the threshold moment, the part of the ceremony that changes everything. And this is the part of the ceremony that everybody has actually come to witness. You know, they might think they've come for the booze and the vol-au-vents, but they're wrong. They've actually come for this moment that changes everything. The moment where the whole dynamic of a relationship changes, when these two people make these lifelong vows to each other. And in doing so, they step into a whole new way of being together. But here's the thing about the threshold moment. It often calls for something beyond the spoken word. Something physical that invokes and embodies the sacred. And rituals do that beautifully, because rituals take something that's abstract, love, commitment, unity, and they give it form. So a handfasting is just one of what are called unity ceremonies or unity rituals. So this idea of giving some sort of form to the vows or the promises that a couple make to each other that symbolise two becoming one. And there are lots of different rituals. I, of course, have a wee preference for the Scottish ones. So handfasting, the quaich, the oathing stone, the cake and ale, the cloutie tree. But there are so many more. There's more modern ones, like the beautiful sand ceremony and wine box ceremonies and love letter ceremonies. You could light a unity candle. There are so many. But of course, we're here to talk about handfastings. So let's do that. So a handfasting is where two people, sometimes more, but that's for other ceremonies. We're talking about weddings. So where two people, where a couple have their hands bound together in some way. Now, at this point, what I'd like to say to people is that there is no right or wrong way to enact a handfasting. I often get messages from both the UK and abroad asking for almost like a set of steps, a recipe for how to conduct a handfasting in the right way. And I always say that the same thing, there is no right way. So if you hear somebody saying you're not doing that right, or that's not the way a handfasting should be done, or that there is indeed a proper way to do it, please ignore that and just do it. Put your own stamp on it. Do it in your own way, or the way that you have agreed with your couple. Now, there are certain knots that can be tied as part of a hand fasting or a hand tying. We'll talk a wee bit about that in a minute. But these knots can be learned. But here's the thing, although the sort of history of hand fasting and the research on hand fasting is a bit scrappy, there is absolutely nothing to suggest that a knot was ever part of early hand fasting ceremonies. That appears to be a much more modern thing. Instead, in the ancient hand fasting ceremonies, a piece of cloth or two pieces of cloth would be gently placed or wrapped around the hands of a couple. Watch William and Kate's ceremony and you'll see the cloth is just placed over their hands. And so it'd be placed over the hands or just wrapped gently over the hands of a couple who were coming together in the union of marriage. And this act, this hand fasting, would be a blessing on the union. And as I said, the roots of hand fasting are a bit vague. And so these different theories have kind of materialised about what the true purpose of a hand fasting was and how it was done and what it was done for. So there are some books like this one. This is A Short History on Marriage. It was written in 1926. And this has a report of something called a hand fasting that was around before the Reformation. And it was more of a betrothal than a legal marriage. So what would happen is, it says in here, every year at the annual fair, a man would choose a woman and they would have their hands fasted and then they would live together for a year and a day, after which, if they wanted to go their own ways, usually if the woman wasn't with child, then they could go their own ways without a stain on their character. But if they found that they were compatible and they wanted to stay together, then that would automatically become a legal marriage. But there are other writings that I've found that say that it was actually used to bring people together in a legal marriage. So I think it's probably been both. I think it's been used in different ways over hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you think about it, if we go back hundreds and hundreds of years when communities looked very different to what they look today, where we have a church, certainly in every village, if not in every corner. But here in Scotland, centuries ago, these clan communities that lived out in the very rural parts of Scotland, it's highly unlikely they would have had a member of the clergy living as part of the community. And if we go back further, clergy weren't even part of marriage unions. It would actually be the clan chief, or it would be the head of the family. But whether it was a clan chief, or whether it was the father, or whether it was a member of the clergy, it was a way of establishing a couple, or establishing two people as a couple within their community. And often it would be the daughter of the clan chief and the son of the clan chief. And it was a way of bringing two clans together, not just two people. It was a contract that would bring two clans together. But a hand fasting would be a way of establishing a couple within their community by having their union blessed by God, because that's what's happening when cloth is wrapped around the hands or tied. This union is being blessed by the sacred. So as I said, hundreds of years ago, if a couple wanted to be together, they would each of them take a piece of cloth that meant something to their clans, and they would go to maybe some sacred, some standing stones or a spiritual site, and it would be the clan chief or, the father, the head of the family, the oldest brother, or a travelling member of the clergy, and this union would be blessed with a hand fasting. Now, for me as an interfaith minister, there is just so much meaning embedded within a handfasting blessing. There is divine love, ancestral guidance, and sacred affirmation of the union. So it's really, really powerful stuff. But let's chat about some of the practicalities of handfasting, because I know that's important to people, both couples and celebrants who are out there. So first of all, the type of cloth you use, or ribbon or whatever. And again, there is no right or wrong here. You can use cloth, you can use ribbon, cord, lace. It can be silk, it can be velvet, it can be cotton, it can be tartan. You can choose colours that have symbolic meaning behind them. It really is up to you. But here's the thing. Try to use something that already has a special energy or a sacred energy in it. So if your granny and granddad have been together for 70 years and you have a wee piece of your granny's wedding dress, wow, just imagine the energy that that's going to bring into your ceremony. You might have heard me saying in other videos that everything in the ceremony space brings its own energy. So the people, the words, all the ceremonial items, the space itself, everything brings its own energy. So it's really important to give thought to everything that you're bringing into that space. And so when you're putting together these, whatever rituals you're having, really think about the items that you're using. Now, my couples, my I Do couples, are offered handfasting ribbons made from Harris Tweed. So Harris Tweed cloth like this. And like these ones, I've made these from that. And I use these because Harris Tweed cloth is very special, because it's still hand woven at home by the islanders in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, right away up there in the northwest. So once or twice a year, when I can, I travel up to the Outer Hebrides and I buy my Harris Tweed up there. I buy metres and metres of it. And then I take it to the Callanish Standing Stones in Lewis, some of the oldest standing stones in the world, where it is blessed. It's blessed by the ancient spirits of Callanish for this blessing to be passed on to all the hands that are bound by this beautiful cloth. So if you're having a handfasting and you want to choose your own material, make sure it's a cloth or a material that you're drawn to or that you already have. I mean, the worst thing that you can do is to leave it to the last minute and then jump onto Amazon and buy the first bit of ribbon that you see. But if you, for whatever reason, you do have to do that, then try and make sure you have your own wee blessing ceremony for it before your actual wedding ceremony. You know, bless it in a wee ritual of your own. Now, let's look at these two terms, handfasting and hand tying, because they often get used interchangeably, but I think they are a wee bit different. If we can think of handfasting as just that act of placing the cloth or just gently wrapping the cloth, but without tying a knot in it. And if we could think of hand tying as placing the ribbon in such a way, but tying a knot in it at some point, then that can help us differentiate between the two. As I said earlier, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that tying a knot was ever part of handfasting ceremonies in ancient times. It seems to be a much more modern addition to handfasting. And that's because it's really popular. Sorry, having a wee sip of my tea. It's really popular. It looks really beautiful in photographs. Couples love to step back and tie the knot, and they like to keep the knot as a reminder of their commitment. So it's really beautiful, and I love it. But I also think that sometimes we celebrants and some couples can get too caught up in the act itself and how the knot is tied and how it should be tied, rather than the beautiful meaning behind the whole ritual. Because to me, the most powerful handfastings are ones that are just done in the moment and are not too heavily scripted, if they're scripted at all, and that just work with the sacred energy in the room rather than having to follow this set of steps or this prescription in order to get it right. But of course, we celebrants, we interfaith ministers, are always guided by your wishes. So talk to your celebrant about what this ritual of hand fasting means to them, and make sure that you are both on the same page. So, for example, in my hand fastings, I don't like to script it at all. I like to just use the energy at the time and in the moment, and most of my couples love that. And finally, the words that you might use as part of your hand fasting ceremony or your hand fasting ritual. Again, your celebrant will be able to help you with this, but you might also want to write your own words of hand fasting and to sit and think, well, what are we trying to do by having our hands bound together? And so you might write your own, or indeed you might let your celebrant work without a script and just be in the moment. As I say, that's the way I prefer to work, because if you think of it, if I've got a book and I'm trying to put this cloth over and I'm trying to read certain words, I just can't be in the moment, fully in the moment with you two, and that's where I want to be. I want to be fully in the moment. But something like, woven into this fabric are the hopes and dreams you both have for your future life together. But this binding is more than just the joining of two hands. It's the entwining of two hearts, the joining together of two souls, and the binding of one life to the other. So whatever you choose to have in your wee hand fasting ritual, the most important thing is that it's right for you. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. There is just the way that's right for you. So talk to your celebrant or your minister. Give it thought, give it time. It's not something that you should just ignore and then hope in the day that it just goes well. And again, don't leave the buying of the ribbons or the cloth to the very last minute. Give it some thought. Do you have something at home that would be perfect for your ceremony? Or do you want to go and search something together that becomes incredibly meaningful? And give that space to grow, and so that when you come together and you have your hands bound in this beautiful, beautiful ancient ritual, then it creates something incredibly beautiful and something that you will remember for a lifetime. Okay, I hope that's been helpful, and I will speak to you all soon. Okay, fair fall.